Going on. We don't have a quorum, but we'll go ahead and get started. So good morning and welcome to the fourth meeting of the Interim Joint Budget Review Subcommittee on Justice and Judiciary for the 2025 interim. This morning we're going to hear from representatives from Administrative Office of the Courts to provide an update on the judicial branch budget. So I would invite you all up to the table. Once you get there, turn on your mics and then introduce yourself. Oh, I'm sorry. Want to call roll. I skipped right over that when I said we didn't have a quorum. If we could call roll.
Senator Storm, Senator Webb, Representative Bray, Representative Decker, Representative Kulkarni, Representative Sharp, Senator Mays-Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Representative Bowling, Representative Elliott, Representative Petrie, Co-Chair Funky Fromeyer.
Present.
Chair Dietz.
Present. All right, now we'll get started. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you. And good morning, everyone.
I don't know that your mic's on.
I'm sorry,
or you may need to.
It's showing green.
And maybe pull it just a little closer.
There it goes.
There
it was
we
a
go.
delay. Let me get it closer for both of us. Good morning. Is that good? Can you hear me? Good morning and welcome, co-chairs Funky Fromeyer and Dietz and members of the subcommittee. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you this morning and go through our current and anticipated next biennium budget, plus some other updates that you had requested of us. So we have those sequentially in our slides, and we'll go through them with bringing up some of our other leadership in AOC that'll be covering those areas. As you can see, we've got a large contingent of leadership from both the Administrative Office of Courts and then other elected officials across our Court of Justice. Some of our judges and our Circuit Court Clerk leadership are here today, and I want to thank them all for making the trip to Frankfurt and supporting us in this effort. So I wanted to call them out and acknowledge them in front of the subcommittee. But we'll go ahead, and to my left, of course, is Carol Henderson, our longtime budget director at AOC, and I'm Zach Ramsey, the director of the Administrative Office of the Courts. Where we'd like to start is just providing at a high level the current breakdown of the judicial branch and overview and where we sit relative to the other two branches and relative to the total general fund appropriation. As you can see from the slide, our fiscal year 2026 general fund appropriation, the amount and the percentage, it represents approximately 2.77% of the total general fund budget. And some color around that, there have been, in the past decade or so, studies from our National Center of State Courts as to where, in a typical setting, where a judicial branch budget should sit relative to the overall general fund state to state. And it's typically in the 2 to 4% range. A good baseline is 3% based on our national center. So we're a little bit low and relative to that. And one of the things I always want to point out that is so unique to the Kentucky judicial system is our role with facilities, the courthouses we build and maintain and support. We are the only judicial branch. We are the only state in the country that is directly involved in that process, whether it's construction, maintenance, operation, all the things that we do that take a lot of our time and a lot of our resources is unique. So even with that added, budget item and resource and all that capacity, we still sit at 2.77% of the total amount and a little lower than what we see as the national standard. And then from there, oh, you already moved in, I'm sorry. And then within that general fund appropriation, the total amount, we want to show our current source of funding. You see the general fund amount that represented the 2.77% of the total general fund. Then the other fairly significant funding stream for us is agency revenue, often referred to as the restricted funds that are authorized by the General Assembly each biennium. The source of that agency revenue and those restricted funds being the various fees and fines that the judicial branch collects, civil filing fees, master commissioner fees. We can see some of the examples here: court technology fees, criminal background checks, expungement fees. There's a range of them. They're all tracked in different restricted fund accounts. And then there's, of course, there's statutes and rules that dictate, to what extent we can access those funds and then how they flow. And we'll talk a little more later about some of those source funds being down and not as reliable, and how they've been built into our operations model, but they don't necessarily represent the amount of fees that we've typically had access to in the past, particularly master commissioner fees that are tied to many of our deputy court clerk salaries. Within our general fund appropriation, just a high-level breakdown. Again, current amounts. Nearly 91% of our general fund appropriation is spent on personnel. Bond payments, that's us paying down the debt service on the bonds that are issued at a local level for us for new construction and also for renovations, but typically new construction, and paying the actual operating costs, the flow through to the counties that own those facilities for all the maintenance and operation, everything that we have to do. So this amount certainly represents non-discretionary expenditures, and it's nearly 91% of all our general funds. So it leaves the remainder within the other pools that there might be any discretion on our part in how we spend them. At some of these other smaller items below, supplies and equipment and information technology and other miscellaneous items are though we have some discretion, a lot of that is certainly things that we require to perform the services that we need to perform. And then just a high-level breakdown, and Carol can certainly speak more to this, but these are the appropriation units that have been set up for the judicial branch. Our largest amount, certainly court operations, and then the significantly large amount within that are the salaries and benefits for our staff and the contractors that we use. Then you see some of these other equipment and other expenses builded up into court operations. And then our local facilities fund, which is I believe completely a pass-through to the counties and the companies that we work with to build, to maintain and renovate and operate all the things that we do at a local level for our judicial facilities. Just as some color, we have 229 judicial facilities, largely owned at a local level, some owned by the state, across all 120 counties, representing about 5.4 million square feet of real estate. So it's fairly significant, relative to our size and scope. The use allowance contingency fund is still in there as an appropriation unit, but that's been a zero for a while. I think those amounts have been handled elsewhere in the budget historically. And then judicial retirement is the judicial branch's portion of retirement for our judges. That's the other unit. And then getting in a little bit to looking ahead to where we are closing out fiscal year 2026 and the remainder of this biennium, and looking ahead, to the next biennium. Since 2010, the judicial branch has been using the agency revenue, typically the restricted fund carry forward and vacancy credits, to balance the court operations appropriation unit, our significant appropriation unit. Particularly in the last couple of years, we've used those restricted funds to make up any shortfall based on any unanticipated costs, inflationary factors, things that we've confronted as we've gone through the biennium. And then, I think within each budget bill, it's my understanding, certainly the one that we're currently working under, within each budget bill that has been passed, it's given the judicial branch the authority, if there are any additional funds, that they do not lapse, that they carry forward, and we're able to use them. So that's been a big part of our operations model and how we've paid for essential services since 2010. And as you know, in the last session, Senate Bill 25, we were still within the fiscal year 25 before that closed out on June 30th. That Senate bill required the judicial branch to transfer $34.5 million of that restricted funds carry forward into this new reserve account. And you'll see that broken down later. A portion of that was then authorized for us to purchase the other building that we now own in Frankfort, which we were leasing from the executive branch on Chamberlain Avenue, where our Court of Appeals is temporarily housed, and where our Supreme Court is now temporarily housed while the renovations in the Capitol are going on. So we own that building now, and that was $3.2 million of that 34.5 has already been expended. But the remainder is in that reserve account and was taken from our reserve restricted fund carry forward before the end of fiscal year 2025. And just to break down, you had asked for some information on the carry forward. Here's a breakdown, both general fund and the restricted funds. At the end of the previous fiscal year 25, we had a carry forward within our general fund, court operations of $329,000, not a large amount. And then our local facilities fund, it was 7.2 at the end of 2025, but you can see from the note there, almost all of those funds were already obligated based on renovation repair projects that were in the works that we were under contract. They had just not been expended yet, but that was so it was a carry forward amount, but not net or necessarily any available funds once we fulfilled those obligations going into this fiscal year and beyond. And then moving to the restricted funds, as I alluded to in the last slide, at the end of 2024, we had a restricted fund carry forward of $51.4 million. And then, as I mentioned, as we got to the end of 2025, we transferred the $34.5 million pursuant to Senate Bill 25 into that reserve account. The $31.3 million is what remains after the purchase of the Chamberlain building, in which we were authorized to use. And then, as we are here today, we have $11.9 million remaining in that restricted fund carry forward, looking ahead to closing out fiscal year 26 in the current biennium. One of the challenges we faced based on the continuing inflationary factors and other unanticipated costs is that as we are projecting from today to the end of fiscal year 2026, that we will need access to that reserve account. We've got a figure here. We're projecting that we're going to need about $13.5 million to pay all the obligations and maintain current service levels for 2026, and that is not inclusive of the costs associated with the repair and remediation of Hardin County and, of course, the Franklin County courts that suffered significant flooding damage, who spent several months operating out of our AOC building and recently, at the beginning of this month, returned to their building. But the remediation there for Hardin County and Franklin County in 2025, we'll get to that slide, but it'll be about another $9 million. We anticipate a significant amount of that, maybe up to 87%, we will ultimately recover from insurance and from FEMA claims that we have put in. But these are obligations, these are debts that are due now based on the timing of when that flood occurred and when our bills are due, that we don't have necessarily 2 to 3 years to wait. So we will need to add that. But outside of that, and we'll get to that slide, this $13.5 million is our current projection. Of course, we have $11.9 million in our current restricted fund accounts. So there is a delta where we will, as we sit here today, we will most definitely need access to that reserve account, formerly our restricted fund carry forward, before the end of fiscal year 26, ideally in April as we go through the next budget cycle, so that we can meet all our obligations as we close out this fiscal year. And then looking ahead, based on this amount, because we're experiencing this over the last so many cycles, and our annual expenses have exceeded what has been our base appropriation for some period of time. We're looking to add that additional funding request, this $13.5 million, and we'll get into that, into our base appropriation within our general fund appropriation, so we can put that in a situation that we view that as more sustainable long term, instead of going through restricted funds or relying on a carry forward or needing early access to a reserve account. We want to build that into our base, as we think that is going to be required funding for us to be sustainable going forward. Thank you. That's where we are, and then looking ahead to what is anticipated for our budget request in the next biennium. Of course, it's September 17th. We have not delivered that official budget request yet. That'll be on October 1. I mean, we anticipate that this is pretty close to final, but just caveating that we've got 13 days But we're working on that, and that'll be in. And I'm looking at Carol because she carries a lot of an awful lot of the weight of that. But that's where we are today, and I wanted to mention that. And this is AOC and many of our court personnel represented today, unified in supporting this. But this is the Chief Justice's budget, what she anticipates presenting and advocating for, and feels very strongly about. And so we are in large part her messenger this morning. What we, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we'll be requesting for full funding of our court operations out of our general fund. We'll be requesting an appropriation of $341 million annually to maintain current operations and programs, which is about a $13.5 million increase, reflective of where we see ourselves now in the current fiscal year. Some of the factors that are relating, to this difference or this need is just I think, as we all know and appreciate, the inflation affecting the cost of goods and services in everything we do. There's been some non-discretionary increases, health insurance that we're all feeling. We have we're carrying 9 new judgeships that were authorized in House Bill 214 in 2022 based on the last judicial weighted caseload study that have not been funded. I think we requested funding for those in the last budget cycle. We've been carrying those since 2023. We thought we were going to carry them till 2027. House Bill 214 extended that to 2031, so we're in a position where we may be carrying those for that period of time without any specific funding addressing it. So that's had some impact. And then we're going to get into this, but as far as our pay practices and where we are relative to the executive branch and other industries, we experience a lot of employee turnover. And then when we're hiring new personnel, it brings in these compression issues where the entry salaries are higher now, due to their qualifications. So these are some of the things that are impacting our costs, going forward. So again, increasing our base appropriation would allow us to maintain our current services, the things that we have to do, without relying as much on the agency revenue and vacancy credits going forward. And then breaking down some of the specific additional funding items, I think all of these items were included in some of our early submissions. I know Co-Chair Dietz and to others that we met back in May and earlier, some of these things were listed out and discussed. So they remain, in our and I believe will be in our official request on October 1. But this is a breakdown of some of the bigger items. This first item, the pay parity plan. What that means first and foremost is we want to address what we see as an historical inequity in the pay levels of Kentucky Court of Justice staff and elected officials. We're looking at a 15% increase across all of KCOJ, and we've got some slides coming up about where our judges sit relative to attorney pay within the Commonwealth and relative to other courts, neighboring courts, and how low we are and where we rank. And we have some data coming up on where our circuit court clerks rank relative to county clerks and other local officials who have CPI increases and other regular increases baked into their payment model that we do not. So they're experiencing an historical inequity. And then also where the remainder of KCOJ and our employees sit relative to the other branches, which we're some percentage points behind, everyone across every average. So that's the big ask is the increase across all KCOJ.
And if I can just interrupt you, I think Senator Funke Frohmeyer has a question. So
Yes, sorry.
Before we move on too quickly.
Yeah, thank you. So much good information, Director Ramsey. Thank you. On the, I believe it's page 12, the judicial branch, the $341 million, the $13.5 million, 3.95, that seems fairly reasonable for an increase. But these next items that you acknowledged on the 15% salary, is that included in that increase of 13.5?
No.
That's in addition.
So the 341 requires an appropriation, but you're going to be requesting an additional appropriation to the 341.
Yes. The 341 just gets us to funding current services at the level that we need. where everything listed on this slide, they're all additional funding items. So we're asking for more money for each one of these.
And when I was looking at that quarter operations, that would seem to be part of the 3.95% increase relative to increases in costs of goods and services.
Yeah, it's just the increase, like Zach said, we've all, inflation is everything that we do is costing us more now, so it's just trying to get our current appropriation up to what we need to maintain our current services.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then there are some other particular items under our court operations additional ask. Certainly the salary increase is the significant piece of that. There's some other non-discretionary increases that and they'll be delineated on our ask, but we have some specific things that we want to note. The Kentucky Department of Library and Archives is increasing some of their fees that we rely heavily on for storage of our official paper record and our historical documents and the things that are housed in our local courthouses and in Frankfurt. That's going to impact. These are non-discretionary to us because it is the official record, and these are things that by Supreme Court rule we have to maintain in accordance with current retention schedules. So there's not always room in all the other local facilities. And of course, we're working on that. We're trying to transition to an electronic record, but at least for the next few budget cycles, we're dealing with a paper record. We need to make some accommodation for where we'll be able to properly store some of this. So there's some fees associated with that, and I believe there's some increases from the EMAR system out of the executive branch that we rely on, that we work within, that we have no control over. If they impose that, then we have to absorb that, and I think we have had to absorb those fees unanticipated in the past, and some other miscellaneous items that will be included there. I mentioned the replacement of the restricted funds. The significant piece of that is we have 141 deputy circuit court clerk salaries tied to that master commissioner fund, which I believe over the last 2 fiscal years is the excess amount that we're allowed to access has been less than $4 million. And to give you some perspective, this is a fund that prior to COVID ranges anywhere from 10 to 16 million dollars, and it's fortunately or unfortunately connected often to events that are going on with our economy as to where those fees need to be, and they are down, and they seem to be historically down and continually down. We don't see them, and certainly don't want events to happen such that they go up, such as we're having serious economic problems. But we don't see those fees ever coming back to where they were when this model was put into place, and we've had some discussions around that before. So we would like to, and this will be a specific ask to replace those restricted funds that are now tied to those deputy circuit court clerks that are essential positions, that they be included in our court operations appropriation out of the general fund. We had also mentioned in some of our early discussions, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about our case management system update, we have technology subscription fees. These are the SaaS fees. These are operational fees that we're joining the club, but this is happening in all industries. The executive branch, we're moving away from our legacy systems, locally hosted systems, things that we're having to patch and support, and with the people that we have, and the new technology that we're availing ourselves of is typically hosted in a public cloud in an environment that's managed by the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world, which are the preferred vendors of the Commonwealth. We're doing the same thing now, and the model there is when you're implementing these new technologies to replace legacy systems that can no longer be supported, like we're doing with our current case management system, that we will then pay an annual SaaS fee, subscription fee to these companies, and then they bear an immense amount of the risk of maintaining that application, maintaining that infrastructure. The system is more reliable, there's less downtime, it's more secure, we're less weather dependent because it's not a server that's in a building that's going to go underwater. The weather events in Kentucky have no impact necessarily on the continuation of a filing and a case management system specific to our court operation. So we get a lot of benefit out of that, but of course it's a different model. And I think Carol can speak to that better than I, but our budget framework isn't necessarily, or the system in place now isn't necessarily set up for that fee that will go forward. And typically based on our contractual obligations, it'll have a 5%, something inflationary increasing that we're paying the vendors that we work with. But again, this is a model that's widespread that we're adopting with our new technologies, particularly around our case management system, and then a few other new systems that we're working in, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in later slides. We noted the JAV system upgrades on here. Our JAV system is still a very unique, one-of-a-kind system in that we rely on an audiovisual record for our official court testimony record. That's still highly unusual, and we've been doing it for a long time. We don't use court reporters. We don't have a transcription. And this JAV system, it's a company in Louisville, Kentucky proud local company that we've been working with for years, and they are refreshing this system periodically. We're on 7. I think we need to get everybody to 8, but we haven't been able to do it. They're going to 9. And things such as AI and all the latest technology is going to be coming out with this system. We've never had, as I've learned, we've never had a dedicated funding stream for what is an essential, by rule, part of our court operations, this audiovisual system. So we're going to be seeking a specific funding stream so that we can direct it just for JAV system and JAV system upgrades. So like the technology subscription fees, we're getting the latest technology from our local vendor whenever that technology is available, which ultimately benefits all our courthouses, and all our court operations have these systems. So they're essential for what we do. The next item is the installation of the AEDs and medical kits. This is something that our Chief Justice feels very strongly about, that we do not have in our courthouses, that as a safety issue, based on possibly some events that have happened where these are not available if somebody's having a medical emergency. It's not necessarily a significant expense, but it's something that we would like to outfit our courthouses statewide to make them more safe and secure. And then we will also be requesting some specific additional positions within our clerk's offices, and then other employee and staffing positions within the Court of Justice that will be delineated in our official ask on October 1. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. And we'll go through these really quickly. I mentioned the 15% salary increase. This is some of the data I mentioned, attracting the best and brightest to the bench. We did some comparisons with attorneys in the Commonwealth, what their range is. You see in the lighter shaded yellow at the top, and then where our 4 main courts, our District, Circuit Court, Court of Appeals, and our Supreme Court, where they currently sit relative to the private sector attorney compensation range, and kind of looking ahead to making sure that we're attracting the best and the brightest, and for all the other reasons that our qualified attorneys would look to the judiciary as a career, that we want to make sure we have a compensation level that makes sense and is attracting those people to the bench for our benefit going forward. We've also, I think we've shared some of the data before, we've looked at our neighboring states, and certainly our Court of Appeals and our Court of Last Resort, we are nearly at the bottom as far as what we pay our judges, and we are well below average for our trial court judges, even adjusted for cost of living within Kentucky. We have a unified system in the Commonwealth. We ask more of our judges than other states do. Their administrative functions, both the facilities that they manage, what our Supreme Court and our Chief Justice does as the Chief Executive Officer of the judicial branch. We ask a lot of our judges and our justices because of our judicial system. So, we're looking to address, that range a little bit, at least pull them up to an equivalent level for other equivalent judicial systems nationally. Then I'd mentioned before, this is the data on our circuit court clerks. On average, they make 11.3% less than the county clerks that they sit side by side with and are similarly situated with in each county. And then those other county officials, including the county clerks, under the rules that guide their compensation, they get an increase in January every year based on the CPI. So come January of next year, that average disparity will probably be around 15%, maybe more, depending on what the CPI factor is. So we're looking to address that for our circuit court clerks and simply make them equivalent to the other local officials that they serve side by side with. And then some other data that shows some of the discussion earlier, where some of our key staff within the Court of Justice sit relative to other equivalent positions. These are from the executive branch. You can see our court designated workers who are on the front lines in our family and juvenile services make on average 35 to 36% less below social workers in the executive branch. And then we have some other pretrial service specialists, 12.3% less than an equivalent position, a probation and a parole officer in the executive branch. These are just some examples, but some of the things we're trying to address with our compensation package. I mentioned, I'll go through these quick, the technology subscription fees. In addition to, and we'll talk about this with the update, with the big CMS implementation, we're not including any SaaS fees, technology subscription fees in this budget request. The ARPA funding, the COVID funding that we were provided in 2022 that started this implementation, we'll be able to make those SaaS fee payments for a little bit longer out of that funding based on our implementation. So we do not anticipate requesting those fees until the 2030 biennium. But we will have, and you see noted here for the 26-28, the next biennium, we have a new case management system for our statewide programs, specialty and pretrial services called CaseWorks that's been implemented, and that has a SaaS fee model, so there will be fees associated with that. We also would like to adopt DocuSign because it appears every stakeholder, everybody in the world is using it except for us. When we sign MOUs and contracts on the facility side and otherwise, we have thousands of them, and it would make our operations a lot more efficient. So we've got not significant amounts, but we have some of these baked into on the technology side as an additional request for the next biennium. And then wrapping this up, full funding of the local facilities fund. We've been talking about the general fund and court operations. Local facilities fund, looking at kind of where we are with our current shortfall, and same model, wanting to include that amount, the $2.6 million over the current base appropriation, into the current base for the local facilities fund. Again, and this has certainly hit us on the facility side over the last number of years, pre and coming out of COVID. Costs of insurance, utilities, supplies, services, everything that we do. And remember, this all happens at a county level. These funds flow through to our counties and to the contractors, the builders, the engineers, the architects that we work with. That's where this ends up. It's very much a service model, and when their costs go up, it's passed through to us and to them. And the county officials are on the front lines as far as we pay them their actual costs, but not a lot of margin. So they're on the front lines as far as managing a lot of this. So we need to make sure that we're able to pay them their actual costs to operate and maintain the court facilities in their communities. And then in addition to that increase in the base appropriation, we have a few additional funding items that we will be requesting in that local facilities fund. And again, to kind of keeping up with what we've seen as that inflationary factor is putting a year-to-year increase into the operating costs. Again, these are the amounts that are passed through and paid to the counties for operation of these facilities. A 10% increase in each year. The next item is an important one. I mentioned the Franklin and Hardin County remediation. A lot of that included restoration of paper files that we're still working under. There's millions there when that happens. We've worked since that has happened to identify an insurance model that we can include our paper court records that are stored in each facility, and I think there's about a $500,000 ask there that we can get appropriate insurance that will cover us if we confront another situation like happened in Franklin County, where a significant amount of paper is destroyed. That insurance will cover that, so it would have the potential saving us millions if we can pay that insurance up front. So we've got that delineated in our ask. We've got a specific note in here, and we'll talk about it a little bit more on the facility side coming up next. But we've got a particular situation in Boyle County where the couple the historical part of that building is pushing down on the top of the building, and there's structural issues, and we're working to find temporary lease space for our court operations in Boyle County, and then addressing that. That's something that has come up just in the last, this year really, that was not part of any previous ask. So we have the need not only to lease space from a health and safety standpoint to get the individuals out of that courthouse while we work on the repairs that will be needed. So we've got a specific ask there for the temporary lease space and fit up for the current facility in Boyle County. And then we have in here, and I mentioned before, we don't have this in our model. I don't believe we ever have, but our local county officials, we pass through actual costs to them, what the contractors and the people that we work with. But like you see in a lot of models, we do not pay any indirect rate or anything additional to the counties to compensate for all the extra work that they do, just overseeing operations, maintaining court facilities. I mean, they have to often go get the bids and work with the individuals directly, and that's time that they spend that they are not compensated for. We're just passing through actual costs. So we have an indirect rate model that we've included into that additional ask for the next biennium. And then you had made a specific request that came out of the subcommittee for coming up in the next biennium or the next fiscal year, those counties that are rolling off the debt service, and we've listed those on here. I think there's 14 counties that will be rolling off that debt service payment that we were passing through and paying in fiscal year 2026 and 2027. So that's a good number. And then at the top we have the savings, the total annual savings associated with that debt service roll-off those years, which I believe, and Carol can certainly explain better than I, is something that will be used for other use allowance. It's a credit going forward that we'll use to pay down.
Yeah, what the budget bill requires us to do is any debt that's rolling off, any deferred funding that was deferred to the next biennium, that helps offset. So instead of asking for $15 million, we might be asking for $13 million in deferred funding because there's $2 million in savings. So.
And if you need any more information about that, but that's high level, what we anticipate happening looking into the next biennium. And yeah, and that's the main. We're going to go through capital construction projects that you had requested update, and Danny Rhodes, our facilities director, is going to come up. But if you have any questions,
I think Senator Mays-Bledsoe has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple. And I appreciate taking the time to hear your presentation and refresh my memory on a couple things. And it's true, we're trying to move from vacancy credits across government being used to supplement government, 'cause that's not a true cost, right? You're basically
Correct.
just filling in the buckets that don't have quite enough, and that's not a true representation of how much it costs to run the government well and to do the job well. So it's a good policy decision, but I also know that it has to come with some asks that come with it. So that's a good thing. Remind me, was it not 2 or 3 years ago we did staff increases for pay?
And I've got a lot of people in the room. I've been here 10 months, and I know that
Okay,
happened.
sorry.
and I apologize. I know there's been discussions about what specifically occurred, and I want to make sure we give you the right percentage, the right answer, the right timing. And Carol may know, but we've got many people behind me that know as well. So thank you.
There hasn't been recently a whole compensation thing, but what the General Assembly did do for a couple of years, whatever increment they gave the executive branch or the legislative, they gave to us too, plus another $2,000. So to help offset. So if you've got need more specific history about any compensation, I can get it to you.
That would be helpful. I was just trying in my mind to remember if we've used, we're trying to do a better job moving forward, I think. And I've only been here, this is my third year. So, and in government, that's very short. So is making sure that we're not using restricted funds to hit general fund salaries, right? That we're being mindful of any salaries that we increase, that we're not using funds that we may not have access to again. And my real goal was to ensure that the increases that we have done in the past have been general fund increases and not restricted funds used to supplement.
The budget bill also allows us and has allowed us to use to give increases. The Supreme Court increased civil filing fees twice, in 2008 and then in 2014, I believe. So a total of $15.4 million on civil filing fees. Raises were given from that, and it was specific in our budget bill. So that is considered a restricted fund. And so every year I have to move $15.468 million worth of expenditures from the general fund to that civil filing fee to help offset those raises
Okay.
that were given back then.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And then the ballpark number of 341, if you were going to increase the slide that showed the 15% pay increase and the other items, ballpark that for me. I know it's not exact, but what's that general ask look like?
So if I understand, all the additional items,
funding,
and I'm going to give you a general number. I know we have that
That's fine.
information, but it's somewhere in the $75 to $80 million range.
Yeah,
based on-
the pay parity plan alone is $37 million.
Okay.
So,
That's helpful. Thank you. And then one last question on facilities. I'm glad to see Boyle County on your list. That is important to myself and Representative Elliott.
Yes.
It is not a new problem. You know, that has been something that's been talked about at least as long as I've had Boyle County. And it's just finally reached a critical, like, we have to do something before it falls in on everyone.
Right.
So I appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing them be taken care of quickly.
Thank you. Do
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you, Chair.
And then Senator Funky Fromeyer has another question.
Yeah, thank you. You actually began answering it. So increases in fees in 2008 and in 2014 relative to agency fees, but that's been 11 years. So are there any proposals in your presentation today or that you anticipate raising those fees?
no,
We,
not the civil filing fees, no.
And do we have some understanding about where those fees that we are charging fall within reasonableness across other areas? You were comparing salaries of members. I'm wondering about fees, these sorts of revenues. It seems to be quite a length of time.
correct. I believe that data exists, and we could certainly provide that where our filing fees relative to the same states we've been comparing salaries to, so you can see that equivalency and see where we sit. We can certainly provide that information. I don't have an exact number of whether we're historically above or below what other states do.
And forgive my ignorance. I'm not. I'm also fairly new in governmental terms, but the process to increase those fees. What is the process?
Just strictly speaking to the civil filing fees, because there's all kinds of fees that we don't retain as the judicial branch. Our circuit court clerks take them in, but we don't retain them. On the civil filing fees, the Supreme Court has to vote to increase them.
And I think some are creatures of statute,
Yeah,
and some are
on the Supreme Court rule.
It's usually one of the other would have to be modified or addressed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good, Dan. You want me to sit here and run it, or? Okay. All right.
And if you could do the same, just turn on your microphone and introduce yourself before you start.
Yeah, I'm Danny Rhodes. I'm the Executive Officer of the Department of Court Facilities at the Administrative Office of the Courts. And again, thank you all for your time and having us here today. And we definitely, hope that these items addressed the questions that you all asked of us. So the first few slides that I'm going to share with you today. Well, the first slide is an update on the Madison County Courthouse and renovation of the historic courthouse in Richmond, Kentucky. That project was, with the addition, a 35,364 square foot facility. That was completed. Construction was completed in April of this year. We moved in early May of this year. This has become a shining gem in the downtown Richmond area. Everybody is high accolades on this facility. The next few slides are current projects that we have under construction, and we'll be finishing up in the next year to 2 years. Bath County Judicial Center, that's a 21,500 square foot facility. The estimated current completion is 85% construction completed. That we anticipate that this project will be done in January of 2026, with a move in soon after that, because we are a little bit behind on our schedule. So we anticipate that we'll be moving in late January or early February for this project. The Crittenden County Judicial Center, this is a project that is just really getting underway. As far as the construction, that is a 23,050 square foot facility. It is 10% complete construction. Foundation work has been started on that, with the first floor slab already underway. We anticipate that this project contractually will be completed in January of 2027. The Oldham County Courthouse renovation and addition. Some of you may be aware of the Oldham County Courthouse and where that was located. We actually picked that facility up, moved it to the center of the courthouse square, and did the addition on the back of that courthouse. So it was a monumental feat to make that happen. But the county is extremely proud of this project, as well as the Court of Justice. But that project is 96% complete, with the anticipated completion date of January of 2026. And again, as with Bath County, we anticipate moving into that one at the end of January, early February. The Scott County Judicial Center, this is a 68,500 square foot facility. We are currently 20% complete with our construction, with the anticipated completion date of November 2026. Barron County Judicial Center, this is a 58,329 square foot building. We did just bid this project out. We fortunately received lower than expected square foot cost on this project. So we will be well within budget and be moving forward with the construction of this project with an anticipated completion date of September 2027. The Butler County Judicial Center, that project is still under design. So the next few slides that I show you, these projects are being designed currently. We are on Phase B design development. Anticipated to go out to bid in early 2026 with this project. And that's a 24,000 square foot facility. The Clinton County Judicial Center is a 31,177 square foot facility. This project is currently under Phase C design, but we anticipate this going out to bid in December of 2025. We have issued an early site package to move forward with the site work to beat the winter weather. So that project or that site package will be starting in the next month, and hopefully we'll have that wrapped up by the time the rest of the building is ready to go out to bid. The Graves County Judicial Center, that is a 30,000 square foot facility. We are under schematic design with that right now, Phase A. Site has been selected and option to purchase agreements have been executed for that site. As many of you know, the downtown area of Mayfield was devastated by the tornado destruction. This site that we are relocating on will be diagonal to the existing courthouse, the historic courthouse that was razed. And the county administration building will be going back on the site of the existing courthouse. So, in an effort to keep this in the proximity of the downtown area, which we try to do with all of our facilities, we feel like that we found, the best possible site for the Judicial Center project there. Preliminary site studies are being conducted. We hope that that'll be completed within the next month. And then the final project that I'll show you that we have under design right now is the Court of Appeals building that will be located on Vandalay Drive, directly in front of the Administrative Office of the Courts central office. That is a 21,500 square foot facility, and that it is currently under design development phase B, and we anticipate this going out to bid in mid-2026, so May or June of 2026. We anticipate this going out to bid with a estimated construction schedule of 20 to 24 months. Projects that we are working right now to get professional service providers established are Caldwell County Judicial Center, Clark County Judicial Center, Greenup County Judicial Center, Knox County Judicial Center, and Owsley County Judicial Center. And as some of you may know, in 2021 through 2023, we conducted an assessment of our oldest facilities. That was 37 facilities that we assessed at that time. We had an outside architect do this assessment. They, through those assessments, created a ranking sheet, ranking order of the greatest facility needs. And as you can see, some of the projects that we have either under construction or under design right now are listed on this list with a single asterisk. The projects that have double asterisks associated with them are projects that are in our 6-year capital plan. So these are projects that we anticipate making a request for either in this biennium or the coming 2 bienniums after that.
We and I want to note on there, Danny mentioned the timing of when we do these assessments, that period of time, and you see the rankings here, critical and high needs. Some of the issues, such as Boyle County that we mentioned, that you see it's on as a high need, but the structural issues that were uncovered recently, that was after the last assessment, going to jump that. In our different on the ranking. This is a strong recommendation. It's not everything, because something could happen tomorrow, and this order may need to change, or facility that's not necessarily at the top of the list would then jump to the top of the list based on those things that are unanticipated. That's why you see Boyle included in that. And then we also want to know you see Lincoln County in there. They've had some significant water infiltration and mold issues that have come up this year, and we are engaged in significant repairs to restore that facility. But at the same time, because of these issues and not knowing the outcome of that repair and whether that's going to sustain that existing facility long term, we're including Lincoln County in that capital plan for a new construction, going into the next biennium or the next 6-year cycle. But I just wanted to note that, particularly for those two or any of the counties, as you look at the rankings relative to what you will see in our next biennium capital construction requests and what you may see in the capital plan, there's particular things that are going on there that are very important to us. Certainly Lincoln and Boyle County are at the top of our list as far as what has emerged recently and what we're focused on and what we want to address, both from the existing facility to make it safe and secure for as long as it maybe that's forever, going to be the existing facility, then have the opportunity to engage in new construction if that becomes the appropriate next move for the Court of Justice.
And of the projects that we will be including in our budget request this year, Spencer County is one of those. The current state of the Spencer County judicial facilities, obviously we are operating in multiple facilities in Spencer County for district and circuit and family court. The court operation, there are security limitations with these facilities. The courthouse annex we are able to secure because we are 100% in that facility, but it is very limited on how we can queue people through the front entrance to that facility, and the space needs are woefully inadequate for that facility. The courthouse itself, we've had some structural issues with the side wall of the annex portion of the courthouse, where another facility was torn down next to that building, and the shared wall started basically just caving in. We have done shoring with the county to hopefully secure that for a temporary measure. But part of this is looking at the facility needs and the square foot needs of this facility. As you can see through our assessment, we did identify major deficiencies with this facility. So some of the space concerns that we have identified that a need for a 25,100 square foot facility with a maximum annual debt service being requested of $3,231,000. And as Zach mentioned, Lincoln County, the Justice Center in Lincoln County, we are having significant water infiltration issues that we have been working with an architect to develop a remediation plan to address some of these. But as we dig in and investigate further with some of these issues, we find some construction issues from when the building was constructed that weren't properly addressed, and that there is needs that we have to address window issues, brick veneer issues, subsurface drainage issues, things like that in this facility. So the request for this facility that would be part of our budget request is for a 30,000 square foot facility. And as Zach mentioned, this would be contingent upon any repairs that we will be able to address for this request. But that maximum annual debt service payment that would be requested for this is $3,844,000. And as has been mentioned, Boyle County, the current state of that building, through a structural assessment that was done of the roof structure and the cupola that is on the building, has determined that hand-hewn timber structure, those trusses, are going to have to be redone. So the whole roof will likely have to come off of the historic part of that building, which is right over top of our circuit courtroom, our circuit judges' offices, some of our circuit clerks' functions. So the need will be to vacate that facility for court of justice at a minimum, and find an alternate location, for a temporary use while this work is going on. There are also security limitations to this facility. They have tried to block off, certain entrances to the building, and we have a very limited security queuing area in this facility as well. As you can see from this facility or this picture, we do have extensive damage that has been identified by the structural engineer to the cupola itself. So a determination is how to address that, whether that's to dismantle and rebuild or, address that in place. So the ask for this Judicial Center facility would be for a 37,000 square foot facility with a maximum annual debt service payment of $4,734,000. And that's the end of our capital construction update, if you all have any questions.
Any questions on this portion of the presentation? No. Okay, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
If you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Lucas, Director of Implementation and Court Services for the AOC. Good morning. We are going to be talking about an update to the case management system project. As you all are well aware, and we much appreciated the appropriation provided to us in 2022 under House Bill 244 for $38 million in opera funds. Those funds will be expended to replace our case management system, currently called KY Courts 2, KY Courts 3. You may know it by different names. To that end, we formed a committee to assist with the request for proposals and to help us select the vendor. And those were elected officials, judges and clerks, who came together with AOC folks to help us select the best vendor, the best fit. As a result, we did launch a partnership with Tyler Technologies in 2024. We actually kicked off the project about a year ago, so we're a year in at this point. And probably the most important thing that we had ahead of the project kickoff was the Supreme Court entered an order for the guiding principles of the project. And to that end, one of the most important things is that we would not customize the system unless required by law, which basically means all of the customizations that we've created over all the years were nice to haves, and we would use the new product basically out of the box unless it was required by law to customize the system. Did you have anything to add?
No, and as some of you may know, Tyler Technologies is purely from a numbers standpoint and successful implementations. They're in a number of states. I think they based on their data, about 55% of all our court operations or people are under one of their systems. They're in many of our border states. They've implemented in other unified court systems. North Carolina is our closest model that we communicate with and work with, and kind of we're the state that's learned from their earlier implementation. So we're working with the national leader in the implementation of these systems, and then, as Beth mentioned, bringing up this system as a consistent platform across all our counties, all our trial courts, and even with our border states using it. It's the beginning of that journey as far as having that type of standardization, and we may be able to customize more in the future, but with the funding and the timeline and what our goals are, bringing their out of the box application, configuring where required by law, standardizing, and then moving from there is going to put us in the best position to move to an electronic record and do other modernization things that'll come in behind that. And I do want to mention, as we get into the schedule, the funding that was provided by the legislature. The team at AOC, this was before I joined, did a great job of setting up that contract in a way in the investment summary that we have to protect those funds, even if we have changes in the schedule and things that inevitably happen in a significant IT implementation, and this is the biggest one in the history of this branch of government for sure, that those funds are locked down and protected, that we're not in a position where we're going to forfeit any of them because depending on when ultimately they're actually paid to the vendor, that was set up in a really strong way. So it gives us a little bit of wiggle room as we implement and make sure we take the time to do it right. Sorry, Beth, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. And I think one of our greatest challenges is to keep all of our applications technically current, right? As the world knows. We have over 280 applications. So with the implementation of the case management system, we call it the CMS, and the e-filing application, we'll replace 38 of our current applications. So that's a huge savings for us in terms of maintaining and supporting those applications. Tyler is a software as a service. So it's one of those things that was mentioned earlier that they will maintain, they will support, and they will provide enhancements to that product. You'll hear us talk to the case management system as Enterprise Justice. We affectionately call it EJ for short. And the e-filing solution is called File and Serve, and we call it FNS for short. So you'll hear that reference from time to time. Zach mentioned that this provides an opportunity for the entire Court of Justice to springboard in terms of implementing consistent processes and procedures statewide. And I think that from a practitioner standpoint, from our justice partner standpoint, from our elected official standpoint, from the public standpoint, that's a huge value add. I could go to Jefferson County, I could go to Fayette County, I could go to Pikeville, I could go to McCracken County, and I'm going to have the same set of applications running and the same set of use cases in those various counties. The other great benefit for this particular project is we're running in parallel. So the Enterprise Justice project is underway, as is the File and Serve project, and they're kind of running like two trains on a parallel track. And trying to keep both of those in sync can be challenging, but it also provides the ability to make sure they're compatible, and it also leverages our resources. So we have a small group, a dedicated group that are working on both of those products with the vendor.
The biggest challenge, as Beth alluded to, is from a configuration standpoint, is making sure these systems are communicating with each other. We want to build enterprise holistic systems. We have mandatory e-filing in Kentucky and have for a number of years. So when you file, that's a perfect API connection into that case management system, because then the records go to the case management system. We have our CourtNet system, which is the primary research tool that attorneys and the public use. That the data goes into that system. We will be keeping that system. Maybe some enhancements. We'll be keeping all that. So we want this to be a seamless system for all, not just for the front end for the attorneys who are filing and engaging those cases, but for the clerks that have to process them, and then everybody who's downstream, whether it's judges who are manipulating them or the public, the media, and everybody else that wants access to that information. That we deal with a lot of requests that we're trying to make sure that's set up in that way. So,
And I do have a question about that. It's been one that I've consistently asked. I know in my county it's been suggested that there's a problem, and I'm going to use the words talking to because I'm not techie, but with EPOs and the service of EPOs. So, that there's maybe a breakdown between what's going to the sheriff's office to serve those documents and then what's happening in the clerk's office. I think we had someone come to Judiciary a few weeks ago, and that was brought up then. So when you talk about being able to make changes to the system, is this something you all can work with the sheriff's office on so that we don't have this problem of getting these EPOs served?
Yes, and there's a current project actually underway too that will help facilitate that, the return of service for warrants. So we have taken that under with KSP, and I know that's the clerks have a big interest in that as well. But the e-warrants application is a Kentucky State Police application, so we interface with it from the court. So it's not our application, but we do work with the Kentucky State Police for enhancements and for just maintenance on that application. So part of that is the Emergency Protective Order, the EPO, comes through that system into our clerk's EQ, and that's where it's processed on that side. So the return of served warrants is part of a new project that's currently underway. You're welcome. And then next steps. So right now we're working with the vendor on refining the project schedule. A year in, we've learned a lot. They've learned a lot. We're both still learning. But we're going to take a couple of weeks at this point to kind of regroup and perform what we're calling a gap analysis, which is to identify any potential gaps that we don't know about yet, that we need to know about before we move forward. So it's a chance to revisit everything that we've got today and make sure we're on the right page. We will be working with them next week on this, and so after that, we'll look at what does the new schedule look like? How do we put this together in a way that we can be successful? The first piece of that is they will deliver us our modifications to the system, because we did have several identified in the contract. One of the big ones is service of process. So we will get those. We will continue our configuration. We will test. And that group that I talked about earlier of the elected officials and practitioners, they'll also help us test. So we'll have a training environment for them to go into and test alongside us to help us make sure we understand what potential defects we have. And then after that, we'll go live. So that sounds like it's a pretty easy path. It's not that easy, but we're going to make it look easy. The goal is to have the Enterprise Justice go lives will be first in Fayette, Hart, Nelson, and LaRue counties. And then the File and Serve go lives, the first go lives for that are Jefferson and Fayette. So the idea is that the entire state will be live on both File and Serve, which is the e-filing system, and Enterprise Justice, the case management system, by between 2030 and 2031. Which sounds like it's a long time away, but it's really not that far away.
I hope to be retired by then, and I don't have to learn anything new.
Any questions? Did you have anything else to add?
I was just going to mention the selection of those counties, because that was one of the first things I noticed when I joined. Fayette, and then Hart, LaRue, and Nelson. Each one, I believe Fayette is on Kentucky Courts 3, the more recent case management system, our legacy system, and the other 3 counties are on the prior Kentucky Courts 2. You know, we've got some very old legacy case management systems going back to the 90s with some of the original technology on Kentucky Courts 2, which is why it's so important that we modernize. But that's why those selections are unique, is that it's the 2 case management systems. We want to build that initial connectivity so we have the model in place, because we internally are going to be responsible for a lot of the statewide rollout. Once we're good, it's done, tested, configured, this is good, we've done it in our go lives. It's really going to be AOC and the Court of Justice. It's going to then regionally going to roll this out to that 2030, 2031 schedule. So, and then of course Jefferson Fayette on the file and serve on the front end, that's going to grab
A lot.
almost the majority of everybody who's doing this work, you know, when you get both of those counties up and going initially, and then it'll be easier from there, hopefully. So that's, thank you. I think that's the slide.
And if there are no other questions, I think we've used up all of our time we have the room for. So
Okay.
would like to thank you all for coming today, and look forward to hearing from you all again when we come back in session.
Co-Chair Dietz, we had also prepared some follow-up information on mental health courts following up on our August 7 testimony, and some of that information, it's in the slides, and
Okay.
we provided it to Perry and others. You know, happy if there's other questions, if you look at that or you want other information, but you'd asked about the 10 expansion sites, and we gave you a map and some information in those slides that should be fairly, speak for itself, but if you have questions, certainly let us know.
We will. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
getting
Thank
that
you.
information
Thank you,
to us.